Welcome back. This video is going to be covering Romans 7, verses 7 through 25. It is the last chunk of a big kind of string of rhetorical questions that Paul answers in Romans chapter 6 and 7. So, we saw already in video, shall we remain in sin that grace may abound? And he answers that in Romans 6 1 through 14. And then he pivots to, well, shall we sin because we're not because you're not under the law but under grace? So does that free us up for sin? He also says no, using two different analogies, slavery and marriage. And then he's going to conclude now with the idea: is the law sin? What is the nature of the law? Which is going to be a big issue for him. This is kind of what's propelling him into the whole rest of the book. He's trying to figure out exactly what is the law. If the law doesn't say, what is it? And he's going to kind of wrap it up in this section. It's sort of like the problem. And once he gets that free, he's able to kind of start processing through everything else he needs to do in the letter. So we're kind of almost at an end to the main argument for Romans, and we're going to start getting into application. Like Romans 8, we're going to see the goodness of the good news, like what makes the gospel so good in Romans 8. And then we're going to see, since that's all true, what does that mean now for a few chapters? And then he's going to have, okay, let me give you some advice on how to run your church for the conclusion of Romans. So right now would be a good time to take a pause and reread chapter 6 and 7 so you can kind of get a feel for what all has happened so far, with a special focus towards the end on verses 7 through 25. So go ahead and do that and come right back. Okay, so if you've already paused and read chapter 6 and 7, let's start. So we're going to be looking at some of the most human, like relatable stuff Paul writes, and it's also some stuff that's kind of tricky, but you kind of get it. Like when you get it, it kind of makes sense of the whole approach, and maybe even makes sense of the whole Bible. It'll give you a guide to like how to read the whole Old Testament by the end of this. So in verse 7 it says, "What then shall we say? That the law is sin? By no means." He always quickly answers to make, just in case there's any kind of ambiguity. "Yet, if it had not been for the law, I would not have known sin." So it's kind of following. So if it hadn't been for the law, he wouldn't have known sin. So the law makes you know sin. "For I would not have known what it was to covet if the law had not said, you shall not covet." He would not have figured out, okay, this part is sin. "But the sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, produced in me all kinds of covetousness. For apart from the law, sin lies dead. I was once alive apart from the law, but when the commandment came, sin came alive and I died. The very commandment that promised life proved to be death to me. But for sin, seizing an opportunity through the commandment, deceived me, and through it killed me. So the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good." So he's defending the law here, but somehow he's getting killed by the law. And so we got to kind of figure out, like, the law, the commandment, and he uses "thou shalt not covet" there to get to a very deep, essential one. That's sort of like the last of the 10 Commandments. Really is sort of like the heart of, I'd prefer this, my neighbor's stuff to my neighbor having it. It's sort of like the inverse of loving your neighbor yourself. It's one of these core sins that bears the fruit of all the other sins. He's not picking like a stray foible or random kind of to deal with. But here this law is good and holy and is righteous. It's a gift of God. It's a beautiful thing. It's something God gave, and he lets you know, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's weak. So an analogy to how Paul views a law is like a good tool, but it's just without it in your hands, it's just sitting there. So if you have a hammer sitting on the ground, the hammer could be something you can build with, but it could also be something you could like destroy with. And it just depends on who wields it, but it's not going to fight back from whoever wields it. And so the hammer could be good, the law can be good, but what's turned out is in our life, sin has been wielding the hammer of the law rather than the Spirit God, and it hasn't been used constructively, it's been used destructively. So hearing "thou shalt not covet," now I get to sort of have an intent behind my coveting, and I know better, and I do it anyway, and I do it in a deeper rebellion than I ever would have, and it's death upon death upon death. So when I hear the law, it's the problem isn't that the law is bad; it's that the law is weak on its own, and where sin is strong with us. So that's sort of the notion of how we deal with the law. The law is still a good gift of the good creative, but it's weak. He says, "Did that which is good then, the law, bring death to me? By no means." So he's got another one of these rhetorical questions he's dealing with. It was sin producing death in me through what is good. The law is good, but sin used it for bad. The sort of rebelliousness in you, the idolatry in you, the rejection of God, use the command for bad. It's kind of like a corrupt lawyer using a phrase in the law meant for good to twist it around to oppress someone they're trying to take advantage of. So sin does that to the law, and then the commandment, through the commandment, uh, through the commandment might become sinful beyond measure. So we actually find out how deep our sin goes, and ultimately how much we need God. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am of the flesh. That's that same word sarx in the last video. Sold under sin. So again, that analogy of slavery that we saw earlier. For I do not understand my own actions, and here he starts going around and around. It's kind of amazing. For do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree with the law that it is good. Like, I know that I don't want to do this, and I know it's a good law, but I'm still breaking it. So now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is in my flesh, in the old Adam and the old rebelliousness of me. And I think it'd be a misapplication to blame the body for the sin here, which some Christians have done. And it's more like Greek philosophy than the Bible, actually. It's really like the sin nature in you, the rebelliousness in you does it. And so it is not that good doesn't dwell in me, it's the flesh. And you find out I don't have it in me. I just rebel and rebel and rebel. And so now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me. He's kind of harsh here. That is in my flesh. He clarifies it really quickly though. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. So you see the law, and it may even inspire like, oh, I know it's not right to covet. I don't want to covet, and then you just keep finding yourself coveting. And so you start realizing that you need something else. And it's not just forgiveness, it's like equipment you need. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I who do it, but the sin that dwells in me. And some of you may have kind of thought this is like the Paul at his most human. And it's like, I want to, but I keep messing up. It's right there. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inner being, but I see my members, so that same language you saw earlier, all this stuff you're under control, or you think is under control, another law waging war against the law in my mind, and making me captive to the law of sin which dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ my Lord. He instantly answers this last question here. Who's going to deliver me from this body of death? Jesus is. So then I myself serve the law of God with my mind. With my flesh, I serve the law of sin. And from there, he's like finally got kind of an answer to the relationship of grace to the law. That grace is going to be able to do for us in serving God and being restored to a right relationship with God and being brought back to a place of worship with God. What the law never could do because the law was weak, not because it was bad. And so next we're going to turn to Romans 8, and I hope you enjoy this video.